Did you know that the United States spends more on its military than the entire European Union combined? In fact, the US military budget is so massive it's almost 3 times what all EU countries spend together. But why is there such a huge gap? And what does this mean for global security? Let's dive into the fascinating differences between the US and EU militaries. The budget battle. US versus EU military spending. In 2023, the US military budget was around $800 billion. That's more than the next 10 countries combined. Meanwhile, the EU's combined military spending was roughly $280 billion. That's still a lot, but it's a fraction of what the US spends. So, where does all that money go? A huge chunk of it goes into military equipment, cutting-edge technology, advanced weapons, and state-of-the-art vehicles, vessels, and aircraft. Let's break it down and see how the US and EU stack up when it comes to their arsenals. Military equipment, a head-to-head comparison. The US has 11 nuclear-powered supercarriers, like the USS Gerald R. Ford, dominating the seas. Meanwhile, the EU has only 3 carriers, led by France's Charles de Gaulle, its sole nuclear-powered carrier. Stealth fighters. The US leads the world in stealth technology, with the F-35 Lightning II and B-2 Spirit bomber. On the other hand, the EU relies on the Eurofighter Typhoon, which is advanced but lacks stealth capabilities. Main battle tanks. The US fields the M1 Abrams, a heavyweight champion with unmatched firepower and armor. The EU's pride is Germany's Leopard 2, one of the most widely used and reliable tanks globally. Drones. The US operates the MQ-9 Reaper, a game-changer for surveillance and precision strikes. In contrast, the EU relies on smaller drones like the Heron TP, which have limited combat capabilities. Naval power. The US boasts a fleet of 70-plus nuclear submarines, including the Virginia class, ensuring global dominance. The EU's naval strength is anchored by France's Barracuda-class submarines, which are advanced but fewer in number. Artillery systems. The US uses the M109 Paladin, a highly mobile, long-range artillery system. The EU counter with Germany's PZH-2000, one of the most advanced self-propelled howitzers in the world. Transport aircraft. The US relies on the C-17 Globemaster III and C-5 Galaxy, capable of moving troops and equipment anywhere. The EU's A400M Atlas is versatile, but limited in range and capacity. Helicopters. The US deploys the AH-64 Apache, the world's most advanced attack helicopter. The EU's Tiger helicopter, used by France and Germany, is capable but less widely deployed. Cyber warfare. The US dominates cyber warfare with its US Cyber Command, a global leader in offensive and defensive operations. The EU is developing its cyber capabilities, but lags behind in scale and expertise. Nuclear arsenal. The US maintains over 5,500 nuclear warheads, with advanced delivery systems like ICBMs and submarine-launched missiles. The EU's nuclear capabilities rest primarily with France, which has around 300 warheads. Population and recruits. The US has a population of 334 million, providing a steady stream of recruits for its 1.4 million active troops. The EU, with 447 million people, fields 1.4 million active personnel and 1.7 million reserves. Military structure. The US operates as a unified military with centralized command, streamlined logistics, and uniform training standards. The EU's forces are split across 27 nations, making joint operations and strategic planning more complex. Special forces. The US fields elite units like the Delta Force and Green Berets, among the most advanced in the world. The EU's special forces, such as Germany's KSK and France's GIGN, are highly capable but operate independently. While the EU has a larger population and more potential recruits, the US's unified structure and elite training programs give it a significant edge in readiness and operational effectiveness. The EU's challenge lies in overcoming its fragmented structure to maximize its manpower advantage. One of the biggest differences between the US and EU militaries is their strategic focus. The US is a global superpower, and its military reflects that. It has the ability to project power anywhere in the world, whether it's in the Middle East, the Pacific, or Eastern Europe. This is why the US has such a massive Navy and Air Force. It needs to be able to operate far from home. The EU, on the other hand, has a more regional focus. Its militaries are designed to defend Europe and participate in peacekeeping missions. For example, EU countries have been heavily involved in missions in the Balkans and Africa, but they don't have the same global reach as the US. This is partly because EU countries have historically relied on the US for their security, especially through NATO. Technology and innovation. Who's ahead? When it comes to military technology, both the US and EU have impressive capabilities, but there are some key differences. The US is a leader in cutting-edge technology, from stealth fighters like the F-35 to advanced drones and cyber warfare capabilities. The US also invests heavily in research and development, which keeps it ahead of the curve. The EU, meanwhile, excels in collaborative projects. The Eurofighter Typhoon, for example, was developed by Germany, the UK, Italy, and Spain. The EU also produces some of the best tanks in the world, like the German Leopard 2. However, EU countries often struggle with duplication of efforts. Each country wants to maintain its own defense industry, which can lead to inefficiencies. Military culture, pride versus pragmatism. Another key difference is military culture. In the US, the military is a huge part of national identity. Think about it. How many Hollywood movies have you seen about the US military? From Top Gun to Saving Private Ryan, the US military is often portrayed as heroic and invincible. This cultural pride translates into strong public support for high military spending. In Europe, the military is often seen as more of a necessity than a source of pride. Many EU countries have a history of pacifism, especially after the devastation of World War II. This has led to lower public support for military spending and a focus on soft power, using diplomacy and economic aid to achieve security goals. NATO and the security umbrella. One of the biggest factors shaping the US-EU military relationship is NATO. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization is a military alliance that includes the US, Canada, and most EU countries. Under NATO, the US has traditionally taken the lead in defending Europe, which has allowed EU countries to spend less on their own militaries. But this arrangement has led to some tension. US leaders have often criticized EU countries for not spending enough on defense. In fact, only a handful of NATO members meet the alliance's target of spending 2% of GDP on defense. This has led to calls for the EU to take more responsibility for its own security. So, what do you think? Should the EU spend more on defense, or is the US's massive military budget justified? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dives into global topics. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.